The blood on her dress had dried to a rust-brown stain by the time she stumbled into the firelight of the cowboys' camp, her bare feet torn and bleeding from miles of rocky terrain. Felicity Davenport had run for 3 days straight, and she would rather die in this wilderness than go back to the man who called himself her husband. The cowboy looked up from his coffee, his hand moving instinctively to the revolver at his hip before he saw her clearly. She stood at the edge of the light, swaying like a sapling in a storm, her once fine dress torn and filthy, her dark hair a tangled mess around shoulders that shook with exhaustion and fear. Her eyes, wide and desperate, locked onto his face with the intensity of someone seeking salvation. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Please do not turn me away." Yates Youngblood set down his tin cup slowly, rising to his full height. He was a tall man, weathered by years of working cattle drives and living rough, with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of sage after rain. He'd been riding alone for 2 weeks, driving a small herd toward the railhead in Pueblo, Colorado, having left the town of La Veta just days ago to avoid the crowds that made him uncomfortable. "Madam, you hurt?" he asked, his voice careful and low, the way he'd speak to a spooked horse. She took a stumbling step forward and her knees buckled. Yates moved fast, catching her before she hit the ground. She weighed almost nothing, all bones and trembling fear. He could feel her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. "Easy now," he said, lowering her gently to sit on his bedroll. "Let me get you some water." Her fingers clutched at his shirt with surprising strength. "You cannot send me back," she said, her voice gaining urgency despite her exhaustion. "You cannot. He will kill me. I know he will." Yates looked down at her hands, saw the purple bruises circling her wrists like grotesque bracelets, saw the yellowing mark along her jaw that spoke of a blow dealt days ago. Something cold and angry settled in his gut. "Nobody's sending you anywhere tonight," he said. "Drink this." He held the canteen to her lips and she drank greedily, water spilling down her chin. When she'd had enough, she pulled back, her eyes searching his face as if trying to determine whether she could trust him. She was young, maybe 22 or 23, with fine features that spoke of a genteel upbringing, now marred by exhaustion and fear. "I am Felicity," she said. "Felicity Davenport. Well, that is not entirely true anymore, but it is the name I claim." "Yates Youngblood," he replied. "You came a long way on foot. Where from?" She gestured vaguely behind her. "A ranch. 2 days southeast, perhaps 3, I am not certain. I ran when I could, hid when I had to. Everything looks the same in the darkness." "What happened?" Her face crumpled, tears spilling down her cheeks to cut clean tracks through the dust. "I made a terrible mistake. I thought I was saving my family. My father died last year, left us with debts I did not understand until the creditors came. Mother was ill, my younger sisters had no prospects. Then Marcus Thornhill came to Boston with his mining fortune, looking for a refined wife to bring back to Colorado. He seemed kind during the courtship, generous. He paid off all of Father's debts, settled money on my mother and sisters. In return, I agreed to marry him and return west to his ranch." She paused, accepting the piece of hardtack Yates offered her, gnawing at it despite how her hands shook. "The kindness ended the moment we crossed into Colorado. He owns land south of La Veta, a sprawling ranch worked by men as cruel as he is. I learned quickly that I was not a wife but a possession, something to display when guests visited, something to punish when his temper flared." "How long you been married to him?" 4 months. 4 months of hell." Her voice broke. 3 days ago I discovered I was with child. When I told him, I thought perhaps it would soften him, but instead he struck me harder than ever before, said the baby would be weak because I was weak. That night, while he was drunk and sleeping, I took what little I could carry and ran. I have been moving ever since, terrified he would catch me." Yates was quiet for a long moment, watching the firelight play across her tear-stained face. He'd seen a lot in his 30 years, most of it hard and some of it downright ugly. He'd witnessed the casual cruelty that some men inflicted on those weaker than themselves, had seen women and children and animals suffer under the hands of those who should have protected them. It never sat right with him, but he was just one man, and the world was vast and brutal. But here was someone asking for help, sitting right in front of him, and he'd be damned if he turned her away. "You can stay here tonight," he said. "Get some rest. Come morning, we'll figure out what to do next." Relief flooded her features, but almost immediately fear chased it away. "What if he comes? He has men trackers, he will look for me. Then they'll have to go through me." Yates said it simply, stating fact rather than bravado. "You sleep. I'll keep watch." She looked at him as if he'd performed some miracle. "You do not even know me. Why would you risk yourself?" "Because it is the right thing to do," he replied. "And because I got 2 sisters of my own back in Texas. I'd hope if they ever needed help, somebody would step up." That night, Felicity slept fitfully while Yates kept the fire burning and his rifle across his knees. Every sound in the darkness made him alert, every snap of twig or rustle of brush. But the hours passed quietly, marked only by the movement of stars overhead and the occasional lowing of the cattle bedded down nearby. When dawn broke pale and pink over the mountains to the west, Felicity woke with a start, sitting up so fast she swayed with dizziness. Yates was frying bacon over the fire, the smell rich and tempting in the crisp morning air. "You stayed awake all night," she said, noticing the weariness in his eyes. "Slept some," he lied. "You hungry?" She ate like someone who hadn't had a proper meal in days, which was probably true. As she finished, Yates laid out his thinking. "Way I see it, you got a few choices. I can take you into La Veta, see if there's a lawman who'll help. Though if your husband is as rich and connected as you say, law might side with him regardless of what he's done. A man's wife is considered his property in most folks' eyes, even if it is not right." Felicity nodded, her face pale. "He knows the sheriff there. They drink together. Marcus donated money to build the new jail. Figured as much. Second option is I can get you to Pueblo. It is a bigger town, more people. Might be easier to disappear, find work, start over. But it is also where he'd likely look for you, knowing you would head for civilization." "What is the third option?" she asked quietly. Yates met her eyes. "I got a small ranch north of here, up in the wet mountain valley. It is not much, just a cabin and enough land for some cattle and horses. Remote enough that folks do not bother me much. You could come there, at least for a while, until we figure something more permanent. I could not impose like that. It is not imposing if I am offering." He stirred the fire with a stick, not looking at her. "I spend most of the year working drives anyway, so the place sits empty. Could use someone to look after it, if you are willing to work." She was quiet for so long he thought maybe he'd overstepped, made her uncomfortable with the suggestion. But when he glanced up, she was crying again, silent tears streaming down her face. "I have nothing to offer you in return," she whispered. "No money, no skills beyond needlework and playing the piano. I would be a burden." "Can you cook?" she blinked. "Yes, though I am out of practice. We had a cook in Boston and Marcus had one at the ranch." "Can you mend things? Handle chickens? Tend a garden?" "I think so. I am willing to learn." "Then you will earn your keep just fine." He stood, began kicking dirt over the fire. "We best get moving. I need to get these cattle to Pueblo and collect my pay, then we can head to the ranch. It is about a week's travel, maybe less if we push. But if Marcus is searching, let him search." Yates's voice was hard. "You are under my protection now, Miss Davenport. He wants to get to you. he'll have to come through me first. The journey to Pueblo tested Felicity's endurance in ways she hadn't anticipated. She rode one of Yates's spare horses, a gentle mare he called Birdie, while he worked the cattle with the efficiency of long practice. They moved slowly, the herd setting the pace, stopping frequently to let the animals graze and water. At first, Felicity could barely stay in the saddle, her body unaccustomed to the demands of riding all day. Her hands blistered, her legs cramped, her back ached with a deep, relentless pain. But she gritted her teeth and endured, knowing that complaint would serve no purpose. Yates noticed, though, his sharp eyes missing little. That second evening, he showed her how to wrap her hands to prevent further blisters, how to stretch her legs to ease the cramping. "You are doing better than most would," he said as she limped toward the fire he'd built. "City folk usually cannot last a day in the saddle." "I am motivated," she replied, lowering herself carefully to the ground. Fear is a powerful teacher. As the days passed, they fell into an easy rhythm. Yates would wake before dawn, start the fire, and prepare a simple breakfast while Felicity rolled up their bedrolls and prepared the horses. They would travel until midday, rest during the hottest hours, then continue until dusk. In the evenings, they would talk. Yates learned that Felicity had been educated at a finishing school, that she spoke French passably, and could recite long passages of poetry from memory. She'd loved reading as a girl, had dreamed of becoming a teacher before her father's death had changed everything. She spoke of her mother with deep affection, of her two younger sisters with protective tenderness. In turn, she learned that Yates was the eldest of 5 children, that his parents had died of cholera when he was 18, leaving him to raise his siblings alone. He'd worked every kind of job imaginable to keep them fed and clothed, finally settling into work as a cowboy because it paid decent, and he was good with animals. His sisters were married now, settled in Texas with families of their own. His brothers had gone their separate ways, one to California and one to the railroads. He'd bought the small ranch 3 years ago with money saved over a decade of hard work, a place he could call his own. "You get lonely?" Felicity asked one evening as they watched the sun set in brilliant shades of orange and gold. "Living alone, I mean." He considered this. "Sometimes. But there is a difference between being alone and being lonely. I got the mountains, the animals, the sky. That is company enough most days." "I think I was more lonely in my marriage than I ever was before it," she said softly. "There is nothing quite as isolating as being trapped with someone who despises you." "He is a fool, then." The words came out before Yates could stop them, and he felt heat rise in his face. "I mean, you seem like good company. Smart, tough." She looked at him with surprise, then smiled, the first real smile he'd seen from her. It transformed her face, made her look younger and lighter. "Thank you, Yates. That might be the kindest thing anyone has said to me in a very long time." They reached Pueblo on the 7th day, driving the cattle to the stockyards where a buyer was waiting. Yates negotiated a fair price, collected his money, and used some of it to purchase supplies they'd need for the ranch: flour, salt, sugar, coffee, beans, and other staples. He also bought Felicity a pair of proper boots, a riding skirt, and a sturdy coat, ignoring her protests about the expense. "You cannot work in a torn dress and bare feet," he said practically. "Consider it an advance on your wages." "You are not paying me wages." "Sure I am. Room and board plus a small salary. You are working for me, it is only right you get paid." She looked at him with those dark eyes, and he saw something shift in her expression, some wall beginning to crumble. "I do not know how to thank you. No need for thanks. We got a deal, that is all. You work, I pay. Simple as that." But it wasn't simple, and they both knew it. Something was growing between them, fragile and uncertain as a seedling in rocky soil. Neither acknowledged it directly, but it was there in the way Yates made sure she got the choicest pieces of meat at meals, in the way Felicity mended his shirts without being asked, in the small smiles they shared across the campfire. They left Pueblo early the next morning, heading northwest toward the wet mountain valley. The landscape changed as they climbed, becoming more rugged and beautiful. Pine forests gave way to aspen groves that shimmered gold in the autumn sunlight. Mountains rose on all sides, their peaks already dusted with early snow. Felicity felt something ease in her chest as they traveled further from civilization. Out here, with nothing but wilderness around them, she could almost believe she was free. Almost believe that Marcus and his cruelty were part of a different life, a nightmare from which she'd finally awakened. "It is beautiful," she said as they rode through a meadow carpeted with late-blooming wildflowers. "I never imagined country could be so beautiful." "Wait until you see the ranch," Yates said, and there was pride in his voice. "Got a view of the Sangre de Cristo Range that'll take your breath away." They arrived at the ranch 2 days later, cresting a ridge to look down into a small valley cradled by mountains. The cabin sat near a stream that wound through stands of aspen and pine, smoke rising from its chimney. For a moment, Felicity was confused, thinking someone had taken up residence in Yates's absence. Then a man stepped out of the cabin, waving. "That is my friend Daniel," Yates explained. "Asked him to keep an eye on the place while I was gone. He has a claim about 5 miles east." Daniel Mercer was a weathered man in his 50s with a gray beard and kind eyes. He greeted them warmly, then looked at Felicity with curiosity but no judgment. "This is Miss Davenport," Yates said. "She'll be staying on, helping manage the place." "Pleased to meet you, madam," Daniel said, tipping his hat. "Yates, everything's been quiet here. Checked on the chickens regular, kept the stove going to prevent mice taking over. You got a new batch of chicks, by the way. Hen went broody while you were gone." They talked for a while, Daniel catching Yates up on local news. Then the older man mounted his horse and headed home, leaving them alone. Yates carried Felicity's few belongings into the cabin, suddenly aware of how small and rough it must seem to someone from her background. The cabin was a single large room with a sleeping loft reached by a ladder, a stone fireplace, a cook stove, a table with 2 chairs, and not much else. Simple and functional, it had suited Yates's needs perfectly, but looking at it through Felicity's eyes, he saw its limitations. "It is not fancy," he said apologetically, "but it is solid, keeps out the wind and rain." "It is wonderful," Felicity said, and she meant it. She ran her hand along the smooth log walls, looked up at the rafters where dried herbs hung in bundles. "It feels safe." "You will take the loft," Yates said. "I will bed down here by the fire." "I cannot take your bed. It is not up for debate. A lady deserves privacy." Over the following weeks, they established new routines. Felicity took over the cooking and was pleased to discover she was better at it than she'd feared. She learned to bake bread in the cast-iron Dutch oven, to fry bacon and eggs, to make stews that stretched ingredients over several days. She tended the chickens, gathered eggs, started planning a garden for spring. The physical work exhausted her, but it was a clean exhaustion, nothing like the soul-deep weariness she'd felt as Marcus's wife. Her body began to heal, the bruises fading, though she still startled at sudden movements or loud noises. Yates learned to announce himself when he came into the cabin, to move slowly and keep his voice even. He watched her begin to relax by degrees, like ice melting in spring sunshine. The child growing inside her became more evident as autumn deepened toward winter. Yates noticed she'd placed a hand on her belly sometimes, unconsciously protective. He wondered what she would do when the baby came, how she would manage. He wondered, too, what his role would be in all of it, and found that he wanted a role, wanted to be part of this woman's life and the life of her child. One evening in late October, as the first serious snow began to fall, Felicity came down from the loft to find Yates carving something by the firelight. He looked up as she approached, and she saw he was making a small cradle, the wood smooth and carefully shaped. "For the baby," he said simply. "Figured you would need one." She sat down beside him, watching his hands work the wood with practiced skill. "Yates, I need to talk to you about something." The seriousness in her tone made him set down his tools. "All right. You have been more than generous, taking me in, protecting me, asking nothing in return. But I need to know what you expect of this arrangement. I need to understand what my place is here." He was quiet for a long moment, choosing his words carefully. "I expect you to work hard and to be honest with me. Beyond that, nothing. You are free to leave whenever you want, free to make your own choices. I am not your keeper, Felicity, and I am certainly not your husband. What if I do not want to leave?" The question hung in the air between them. "What if I want to stay, not as a worker but as something more?" His heart kicked hard against his ribs. "What are you saying?" She met his eyes, her own filled with a mixture of hope and fear. "I am saying that I care for you, Yates Youngblood. I am saying that when I think about the future, I cannot imagine it without you in it. I am saying that despite everything Marcus did to me, despite all the reasons I should never trust a man again, I trust you. I think I might even love you." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, and took her hand in his. Her fingers were rough now from work, the hands of someone who'd learned to survive. "I love you too," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Have for a while now, if I am being honest. But I did not want to pressure you, did not want you to feel obligated because I helped you. You have never made me feel obligated. You have only made me feel safe and valued and cared for. That is why I love you." He lifted her hand to his lips, kissed her knuckles gently. "The baby is part of me, and if you can accept me, you must accept the child as well. I will not be separated from my baby. I would not ask you to be. If you will have me, I will raise that child as my own, love them as my own. Give them the name Youngblood and all the protection that comes with it." Tears spilled down her cheeks, but they were good tears this time, tears of relief and joy. "Are you asking me to marry you?" "I am. Though I know it is complicated, you being legally married to Thornhill still. We would have to figure that out, find a way to end that marriage proper. But Felicity, I want you to be my wife in truth and in the eyes of God and the law. I want to build a life with you, raise this baby and maybe more if you are willing. I want to grow old with you in this valley, watching the seasons change." She leaned into him, and he wrapped his arms around her carefully, as if she were something precious and breakable. "Yes," she whispered against his chest. "Yes to all of it." They sat like that for a long time, holding each other while the snow fell outside and the fire crackled on the hearth. For the first time in longer than she could remember, Felicity felt completely at peace. But peace, she would learn, was often fragile and hard-won in the wild country of Colorado in 1883. The first sign of trouble came in mid-November, when Daniel rode up to the cabin with news. He looked grim as he dismounted, and Yates stepped out to meet him with a growing sense of dread. "There is men asking about a woman in the area," Daniel said without preamble. "Stopped at my place yesterday, described her to a T. Said they are looking for a runaway wife, that her husband is worried about her, especially since she is carrying his child." Yates felt his blood run cold. "How many men?" "4 that I saw. Well armed, led by a fellow named Garrett, works for some big rancher south of Lavetta." I played dumb, said I had not seen anyone matching that description. But Yates, they are going to keep looking. They will get here eventually. Inside the cabin, Felicity had heard enough. She appeared in the doorway, her face pale but composed. "I will not go back," she said. "I will die first." "It is not going to come to that," Yates said firmly. "Daniel, these men, they seem like the type to respect the law. They seem like the type to do whatever their boss pays them to do, law be damned." Yates thought hard. "We need to make this legal. If Felicity is no longer Thornhill's wife in the eyes of the law, he has no claim on her. But getting a divorce takes time, and we do not have time." "There might be another way," Daniel said slowly. "You heard of Judge Fairfax over in Reseda. He is known to be a fair man, sympathetic to women in bad situations. If Felicity went before him, explained what happened, showed him the evidence of abuse, he might be willing to grant an annulment on the grounds that the marriage was entered under duress, and that Thornhill proved to be dangerous. It is not common, but I have heard of him doing it before. Reseda is 2 days' ride," Yates said, "and we would have to go through territory where Thornhill's men might be searching." "Then we do not take the main trails," Felicity said. "We go through the mountains, the harder route." "They will not expect that, especially not with winter coming." Yates looked at her, this woman who'd been refined and sheltered just months ago, now proposing to cross the Sangre de Cristo Range in November. "It will be dangerous. The weather could turn on us. Staying here is also dangerous. At least if we are moving, we have a chance." He knew she was right. "Daniel, can you come with us? I would feel better with another gun." "Already planned on it. We should leave tomorrow at first light before those men expand their search pattern this direction." They prepared through the night. Yates packed supplies on 2 pack horses while Felicity bundled up warm clothing and what food they could carry. When she went to lie down for a few hours of sleep, Yates checked his weapons: a rifle, a shotgun, and 2 revolvers. He prayed he would not need to use any of them, but he would be ready if it came to it. They left before dawn, moving quickly through the dark forest. Yates led, followed by Felicity, with Daniel bringing up the rear and watching their back trail. The path he chose was barely a deer trail, winding through dense timber and over rocky slopes. It would be grueling, but it would also be nearly impossible to track. The first day passed without incident. They climbed steadily, the air growing thinner and colder as they gained elevation. Felicity's face was pinched with exhaustion by the time they made camp that night in a sheltered hollow, but she did not complain. Yates built a small, smokeless fire and made sure she ate before rolling out her bedroll close to the warmth. "How are you holding up?" he asked softly, kneeling beside her. "I am well enough. The baby is active today, lots of kicking. I think they are protesting the rough ride." He smiled at that. "We will be in Reseda tomorrow evening if all goes well. Then you can rest proper. You think this judge will help us?" "I hope so. But even if he does not, we will find another way, I promise you that." She reached up and touched his face, her fingers cold against his cheek. "I know you will. I trust you with my life, Yates, with both our lives." He kissed her gently, mindful of the sleeping child she carried. "Get some rest. Tomorrow will be another long day." But morning brought new challenges. They woke to find 6 inches of fresh snow had fallen during the night and more was coming down. The trail, already difficult, became treacherous. The horses struggled through the deepening drifts, and twice they had to dismount and lead the animals across sections where the footing was too uncertain. By midday, they were only halfway to Reseda, and Yates was beginning to worry. The snow showed no signs of stopping, and the temperature was dropping. If they got caught in a real storm up here, they could be in serious trouble. "There is a line shack about 2 miles north," Daniel said, reading Yates's thoughts. "Built it myself a few years back. We could shelter there if needed." They pushed on, fighting the weather and the terrain. Felicity was shivering violently by the time the small cabin came into view, her lips tinged blue despite the layers of clothing. Yates lifted her from the saddle and carried her inside while Daniel tended the horses. The line shack was crude, just 4 walls and a roof with a small fireplace, but it was shelter. Yates got a fire going while Felicity huddled in her coat, trying to stop her teeth from chattering. He wrapped her in every blanket they had and made hot coffee, holding the cup to her lips until she could hold it herself. "I am sorry," she said. "I am slowing you down." "You are doing amazing," he corrected. "Most people would have given up long ago." "You are one of the strongest people I have ever met, Felicity." Daniel came in, stomping snow from his boots. "Horses are sheltered as best as I could manage. Storm's getting worse. We are stuck here until it blows over." They spent that night and the next day in the line shack, waiting out the blizzard. The forced stillness gave them time to talk, to plan. Daniel shared what he knew about Judge Fairfax, how the man had a reputation for being tough but fair, how he'd once helped a woman escape an abusive situation similar to Felicity's. "The key is evidence," Daniel explained. "Can you prove what Thornhill did to you?" Felicity pushed up her sleeves, showing the scars that remained on her wrists where he'd bound her once for an entire day as punishment for some imagined slight. She touched her ribs, which had been cracked when he'd kicked her. "My body is the evidence. And I can describe things about the ranch, about his business dealings, things a woman would only know if she truly lived there as his wife. I can prove I was there, prove he hurt me." "That should be enough," Daniel said. "Fairfax is not like some judges who think a man has the right to do whatever he wants to his wife. He believes in justice." The storm broke on the second morning, leaving the world white and sparkling. They set out again, making better time now that the snow had stopped. By evening, they rode into Reseda, a small mining town nestled in the hills. The judge had a house on the edge of town, a neat building with smoke rising from its chimney. Judge Fairfax answered the door himself, a silver-haired man in his 60s with sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. He listened to their story, examined Felicity's scars, asked pointed questions about her marriage and Marcus Thornhill's behavior. Then he sat back in his chair and was quiet for a long time. "I know of Marcus Thornhill," he said finally. "Heard things about him over the years, none of it good. But he has money and influence, and that matters to a lot of people." Felicity's face fell, but the judge held up a hand. "However, it does not matter to me. I took an oath to uphold justice, and there is no justice in forcing a woman to return to a man who beats her, who terrorizes her. Based on what you have told me and shown me, I am prepared to grant an annulment of your marriage on the grounds of duress and cruelty. The marriage will be considered void, as if it never existed." Relief flooded through Felicity so powerfully she felt dizzy. Thank you so much." "There is one condition," the judge said. "Thornhill will not accept this easily. He will fight it, might even try to take action outside the law. You will need protection, and you will need to be prepared to testify if this goes to a higher court." "I will testify," Felicity said firmly. "I will tell anyone who will listen what kind of man he is." "Good. I will draw up the papers tonight. You can sign them tomorrow morning, and I will file them with the territorial court. After that, you will be free, Miss Davenport. Free to marry again if you choose, free to live your life as you see fit." They stayed that night at the small boarding house in Reseda. For the first time in weeks, Felicity slept deeply and without nightmares, knowing that with the morning would come freedom. True to his word, Judge Fairfax had the papers ready at dawn. Felicity signed them with a steady hand, her signature bold and clear. As the ink dried, she felt as if chains she had not fully realized she was carrying suddenly fell away. "What will you do now?" the judge asked. "I am going to marry the man I love," she said, looking at Yates. "And I am going to raise my child in peace and safety. That is all I want." They were married 3 days later in the small church in Reseda, with Daniel as witness and the minister's wife standing up for Felicity. She wore a simple blue dress that she'd bought with some of the wages Yates had paid her, and Yates wore his best shirt and had trimmed his beard. They spoke their vows with complete sincerity, promising to love and honor each other through whatever hardships might come. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Yates kissed her gently, and Felicity felt happiness so pure and complete it brought tears to her eyes. This was what marriage was supposed to be, a choice freely made, a partnership built on respect and genuine affection. They returned to the ranch as husband and wife, arriving in early December to find the valley transformed by winter. Snow blanketed everything, making the world clean and new. Yates carried Felicity across the threshold of the cabin, both of them laughing at the old tradition, and then set her down carefully. "Welcome home, Mrs. Youngblood," he said. "It is good to be home, Mr. Youngblood," she replied and kissed him again. Winter settled in deep and cold, but inside the cabin there was warmth and contentment. They spent the long evenings talking, reading from the few books Yates owned, planning for the future. He worked on the cradle, making it perfect. She sewed baby clothes from fabric he'd bought in Reseda, tiny gowns and blankets soft as clouds. They grew closer in those quiet months, learning each other's rhythms and habits. Yates discovered that Felicity sang while she worked, soft lullabies and folk songs. Felicity learned that Yates had a dry sense of humor, and that he talked to the horses as if they could understand every word. They shared stories of their childhoods, their dreams, their fears, and they fell deeper in love with each passing day. In late January, Daniel rode over to check on them, fighting through deep snow to reach the cabin. He brought news that made Yates tense. Marcus Thornhill had learned of the annulment and was reportedly furious. He tried to get the territorial court to overturn it, but Judge Fairfax's decision had been upheld. Legally, Felicity was free and Thornhill had no claim on her. "But he has been making threats," Daniel said, "saying no woman makes a fool of him and gets away with it. Saying he will get back what belongs to him." "I do not belong to him anymore," Felicity said. "I never truly did." "I know that, and you know that," Daniel replied. "But men like Thornhill do not accept defeat easily. You should be careful, keep watch." They thanked him for the warning. After he left, Yates made sure his weapons were cleaned and loaded, that he knew where they were at all times. He was not a violent man by nature, but he would defend his wife and home if forced to it. February brought the worst of the winter weather, storms that piled snow so deep it reached the cabin windows. They were snowed in for days at a time, cozy and safe in their small sanctuary. It was during one of these storms that Felicity's pains began. It was the middle of the night when she woke him, her hand on his shoulder. "Yates, the baby is coming." He was up instantly, his heart racing. They'd prepared as best they could, had clean cloths and hot water and all the things the midwife in Reseda had told them they would need. But that midwife was miles away, unreachable through the storm, and Yates had never helped birth a baby in his life. "Tell me what to do," he said, forcing his voice to stay calm. "I am here and I will help you through this." The labor lasted through the night and into the next day, long hours of pain that Felicity bore with remarkable courage. Yates stayed with her, holding her hand, wiping her face with cool cloths, murmuring encouragement. He'd helped birth calves and foals, but this was different. This was the woman he loved bringing new life into the world. Finally, as the winter sun was setting on the second day of the storm, A baby's cry filled the cabin. Yates caught the tiny, slippery body in his hands, overwhelmed by the miracle of it. A boy, small but healthy, with dark hair and lungs that clearly worked just fine. He cleaned the baby carefully, wrapped him in soft blankets, and placed him in Felicity's arms. She was exhausted, her hair plastered to her forehead with sweat, but she'd never looked more beautiful to him. "He is perfect," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Look at him, Yates. He is perfect." "He is," Yates agreed, his own eyes wet. "What do you want to name him?" She looked up at him, this man who'd saved her, protected her, loved her. "I want to name him after you, Yates Youngblood Jr. Are you sure? He could have a fresh start, a name all his own." "He will have a fresh start by being your son, by having you as his father. That is the greatest gift I can give him." Yates leaned down and kissed her forehead, then gently touched the baby's cheek. "Then Yates Jr. it is. Welcome to the world, son. We have been waiting for you." The days that followed were exhausting and wonderful. The baby was demanding, needing to be fed every few hours, but Felicity took to motherhood naturally. Yates discovered he loved the quiet moments of holding his son, watching the tiny face scrunch up or relax in sleep. He felt a fierce protectiveness toward this small person, a determination that nothing would ever harm him. Spring came slowly to the valley, melting the snow by degrees. As soon as the trails were passable, Daniel came to visit, bringing gifts for the baby: a hand-carved rattle and a soft rabbit skin blanket. He admired young Yates with the enthusiasm of an honorary uncle. "He has your eyes, Felicity," Daniel observed. "And I suspect he will have Yates's stubbornness." "God help us all if that is true," Felicity said with a laugh. Life settled into a new rhythm. Felicity cared for the baby while also managing the household. Yates worked the ranch, tending the growing herd of cattle and horses. In the evenings, they would sit together, Felicity nursing the baby while Yates read aloud or worked on various projects. It was a simple life, but it was theirs and it was good. Summer brought longer days and easier living. Felicity's garden flourished, providing fresh vegetables. The chickens laid well, and Yates sold some horses for good money. They were not rich, but they were comfortable, and more importantly, they were happy. It was in late August, nearly a year after Felicity had first stumbled into Yates's camp, that Marcus Thornhill finally made his move. Yates was working on fixing a section of fence when he saw riders approaching. 4 men, armed, riding with purpose. He recognized the lead rider from a wanted poster he'd seen in town. A hired gun named Garrett, the same man Daniel had warned them about months ago. Yates walked back to the cabin, moving casually so as not to alarm the men but getting there as quickly as he could. "Felicity, take the baby and go up to the loft. Do not come down no matter what you hear." She heard the tension in his voice and didn't argue. She scooped up young Yates and climbed the ladder quickly. From the loft, she could see down into the main room, could see Yates positioning himself near the door with his rifle. The riders stopped outside. "You Youngblood," Garrett called. "I am. State your business." "We are here for Felicity Thornhill. Her husband wants her back." "There is no Felicity Thornhill. There is a Felicity Youngblood, and she is my wife, legally married. Now get off my land," Garrett laughed. "You think some annulment means anything?" Marcus Thornhill was her husband first, and he has rights to her and the baby. "He has no rights. The law says so, and I say so. Last chance. Leave now, or I will make you leave." "1 man against 4. I do not like those odds for you." "Who said he is just 1 man?" Daniel's voice came from the side of the cabin. He stepped into view, shotgun leveled at the riders. "I make it 2 against 4, and we have the home advantage. Now, I suggest you take my friend's advice and ride out while you still can." The riders exchanged glances. They had not expected resistance, had thought to intimidate a lone rancher into giving up the woman. This was a different situation entirely. Thornhill is not going to let this go, Garrett said. He will send more men. Then they can end up the same way you are about to if you do not leave, Yates replied. I am done talking. You got until I count to 3. 1. The riders began backing their horses up. 2. They turned and spurred their mounts into a gallop, disappearing back down the trail. Yates and Daniel watched until they were out of sight, then lowered their weapons. That is not the end of it, Daniel said quietly. I know, but at least it bought us some time. Felicity came down from the loft, the baby in her arms. She was pale but composed. What do we do now? We need to end this permanently, Yates said. I am tired of looking over my shoulder, tired of worrying that Thornhill will send men after you. It is time to face this head-on. What are you proposing? I am going to go see Marcus Thornhill myself. I am going to make him understand that you are done with him, that he needs to let this go and move on with his life. That is too dangerous. He could have you killed. Maybe, but I will not do it alone. Daniel, think you could round up some men who'd be willing to ride with me? Men who do not take kindly to wife-beaters. Daniel grinned. I know at least a dozen who'd be happy to help. Give me 2 days. True to his word, Daniel returned with a group of local ranchers and miners, all of them armed and all of them sharing a disgust for men who abused women. They were a rough bunch, but they were good men, and Yates trusted them. We ride tomorrow, Yates told Felicity. This will be finished one way or another. She held him tight that night, afraid of what might happen but knowing he had to do this. Come back to me, she whispered. Come back to us. I will, he promised. I have too much to live for not to. They rode out at dawn, a group of 15 men heading southeast toward Thornhill's ranch. It took 2 days of hard riding to reach it, a sprawling operation with a large house and numerous outbuildings. Yates had Daniel and half the men wait out of sight while he rode up to the house with the others, wanting to try talking before resorting to anything else. Marcus Thornhill came out onto the porch as they approached. He was a big man, well-dressed, with cold eyes and a cruel mouth. When he saw Yates, he smiled, but there was no warmth in it. I assume you are the fool who thinks he can steal another man's wife, Thornhill said. I did not steal anything. Felicity chose to leave you because you beat her and terrorized her. Then she chose to marry me. It is all legal and proper, and you have no claim on her. That is where you are wrong. I have every claim. I paid good money for that woman, settled her family's debts. She owes me. People are not property you can buy. She does not owe you anything except maybe a charge of assault and battery if she decided to press it. Thornhill's face darkened. You have no idea who you are dealing with. I have money, influence, men willing to do whatever I tell them. You are just a small-time rancher with more pride than sense. Maybe, but I got something you do not have. I got the respect of honest men who believe in doing what is right. Yates gestured to the men with him. Every one of these men came here because they heard about what you did to Felicity. Because they got wives and daughters and sisters, and they understand that a real man does not raise his hand to a woman. The other men nodded, their faces hard. Thornhill looked at them and seemed to realize for the first time that he might be in real trouble. His hired guns had appeared from the bunkhouse, but they were outnumbered, especially once the rest of Yates's group rode into view. Here is how this is going to go, Yates said. You are going to publicly acknowledge that the marriage to Felicity was annulled, that you have no claim on her or her child. You are going to stop sending men after her. You are going to leave us alone. In return, she will not press charges for what you did, and we will all ride out of here peaceful. And if I refuse, Then we take this to the territorial court, and Felicity testifies about every beating, every threat, every cruelty. You might have money and influence, but after a dozen men corroborate her story and talk about your reputation, I do not think even your money will save you. Or we could handle this here and now, outside the law. Your choice. Thornhill was silent for a long time, weighing his options. Finally, he nodded curtly. Fine. She was not worth the trouble anyway. You want her, you can have her. But if I ever see either of you again, the deal is off. Fair enough. We will stay in the wet mountain valley and you stay down here. Our paths will not cross. Thornhill went inside and returned with a handwritten note, stating that he acknowledged the annulment and relinquished all claims on Felicity Davenport Youngblood and her son. It was not a legal document, but it was something, a written acknowledgment witnessed by nearly 24 men. Yates took the paper, folded it carefully, and put it in his pocket. Then he mounted his horse and rode away without looking back, his companions following. They'd gone maybe a mile when he heard Daniel ride up beside him. That was easier than I expected, Daniel said. Bullies usually fold when they face real opposition, Yates replied. Thornhill is a coward at heart. He only feels powerful when he is hurting someone weaker than himself. They made good time back to the valley, arriving late on the third day. Felicity ran out of the cabin when she heard the horses, the baby in her arms. When she saw Yates, whole and unharmed, she started crying with relief. He dismounted and pulled her into his arms, holding her and the baby close. "It is over," he said. "It is really over." Thornhill agreed to leave us alone. "We are free, Felicity, truly free." She sobbed against his chest, months of fear and tension finally releasing. "I cannot believe it. I cannot believe we are safe. Believe it. From now on, we live our lives without looking over our shoulders. We raise our son, work this ranch, and build the future we want. That is all that matters now." The years that followed were the best of Yates's life. Young Yates grew into a bright, energetic boy who loved horses and could ride almost before he could walk. Felicity thrived, transforming from the frightened woman who'd stumbled into his camp into someone strong and capable and joyful. The ranch prospered, growing steadily as Yates's reputation for honest dealing and quality stock spread. 2 years after young Yates was born, Felicity gave birth to a daughter they named Sarah. 3 years after that, another son came whom they called Thomas. The cabin grew, room by room, until it was a proper house with space for their expanding family. Felicity stayed in touch with her mother and sisters through letters, and eventually, when young Yates was 6, her mother came to visit and ended up staying. She was charmed by the wild beauty of the valley and by the grandchildren she'd feared she might never meet. "I worried so much when you went west," she told Felicity one evening as they sat on the porch watching the children play. "I thought I was sending you to your doom." "In a way you did," Felicity replied, "but I found salvation too. If I had not married Marcus, I would never have run away. If I had not run away, I would never have found Yates. Everything happened exactly as it was meant to." On their 10th wedding anniversary, Yates took Felicity back to the meadow where they'd first met, leaving the children with their grandmother. It was summer, and the meadow was full of wildflowers just like it had been all those years ago. "You remember that night?" he asked as they stood together in the fading light. "Every detail. I was so frightened, so desperate. I did not know if I would live through the next day. Then I saw your fire, saw you sitting there, and something told me to trust you." "Best decision you ever made," he teased. "Second best," she corrected. "The best decision was choosing to stay to build a life with you." She took his hand, laced their fingers together. "I love you, Yates Youngblood. I loved you then, I love you now, and I will love you until my last breath. And I love you, Felicity Youngblood. You and our children are the greatest gifts I ever received. Everything good in my life started the night you stumbled into my camp and begged me not to send you back. I saw your tears and opened my door, and in doing so, I found everything I ever needed." They stood together as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The air was warm, filled with the scent of pine and wildflowers. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called, and from the valley below came the faint sound of their children laughing. They had built something real here, something lasting. From fear and desperation had grown love and security. From two broken people had come a family, a home, a future bright with promise. The years continued to pass, bringing their share of joys and sorrows. Yates's hair went gray and lines deepened around Felicity's eyes. Their children grew and eventually brought home spouses of their own. Grandchildren came, filling the house with noise and energy. Young Yates, who'd never known any father but the man who raised him, grew up to be a fine rancher himself, eventually taking over most of the day-to-day operations of the ranch. Sarah became a teacher in La Veta, educating the next generation. Thomas went east to study medicine, then returned to open a practice in the valley, where his services were desperately needed. Through it all, Yates and Felicity remained each other's anchors. They still shared coffee on the porch each morning, still talked late into the night. The love between them, forged in hardship and tested by time, only grew stronger. When Yates was 65, a young woman came to the ranch, dirty and frightened, asking for help. Her husband had been beating her, she said, and she had nowhere else to go. Yates and Felicity took her in without hesitation, gave her work and shelter, helped her get a divorce and start over. It became something of a pattern over the years. Word spread that the Youngbloods would help women in trouble, and more came, seeking sanctuary. Felicity made it her mission to help them, remembering her own desperate flight. She taught them skills they could use to support themselves, helped them find jobs or start businesses. Some moved on to other places, others settled in the valley, building new lives free from fear. The community grew stronger for it, becoming a place where women knew they would be protected and valued. On a spring morning in 1920, when Yates was 77 and Felicity 72, they sat on the porch of their home and watched the sun rise over the mountains they'd loved for so long. They held hands, their fingers intertwined as they'd been for nearly 4 decades. "You ever regret it?" Felicity asked. Taking in a desperate stranger all those years ago, Yates squeezed her hand gently. "Not for a single moment. You were the best thing that ever happened to me. Even with all the trouble I brought, especially with the trouble, made life interesting." He smiled at her, his eyes still full of love. "We built something good here, Felicity. A family, a home, a legacy. Our children and grandchildren will carry on long after we are gone, and they will remember that it all started with compassion, with choosing to help someone in need." "I would not change a thing," she said softly. "Not the pain, not the fear, not any of it, because all of it led me to you and to this life we have built together." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the world wake up around them. The ranch was bustling now, with their son and his family living in the newer house down by the stream, grandchildren running through the fields, great-grandchildren taking their first steps. The valley rang with life and laughter, with the sounds of a community built on kindness and hard work. As the sun climbed higher, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Yates pulled Felicity close. She rested her head on his shoulder, and together they watched the day begin, grateful for every moment they'd been given, for every challenge they'd overcome, for every joy they'd shared. Their story had begun with tears and desperation, with a woman begging not to be sent back, and a man choosing compassion over convenience. It had grown into something neither could have imagined that night long ago. A love that had weathered every storm, a family that would endure for generations, a legacy of helping others and standing up for what was right. As evening came on that same day, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, Yates looked around the table and felt a deep satisfaction. He caught Felicity's eye across the crowded room and saw his own contentment reflected there. They'd lived a good life, a life of purpose and meaning, and though they both knew their time was growing shorter, there were no regrets. That night, as they prepared for bed, Felicity found the cradle Yates had carved all those years ago, now battered with use from 3 children and a dozen grandchildren. She ran her fingers over the smooth wood, remembering the young man who'd made it with such care, the young woman who'd been so frightened and alone. "We did all right, did we not?" she said to Yates as he came to stand beside her. "We did better than all right," he replied, wrapping his arms around her waist. "We did magnificent." They lived several more good years, seeing the valley grow and change, seeing automobiles replace horses on some of the roads, seeing the world transform around them while they remained constant. Their love story became something of a legend in the area, the tale of the cowboy who'd saved a desperate woman and ended up finding his soulmate. When Yates finally passed away at the age of 82, with Felicity holding his hand and their children gathered around, his last words were ones of gratitude and love. "Best life a man could ask for," he whispered. "Thank you for sharing it with me." Felicity lived 2 more years, spending her days with family and continuing her work helping women in need. She spoke often of Yates, keeping his memory alive for the youngest generation who'd never met him. She told them about the night she'd stumbled into his camp, about how he'd seen her tears and opened his door, about how that one act of kindness had changed everything. When she joined him at last, she was buried beside him on a hill overlooking the valley they'd loved, under the shadow of the mountains that had witnessed their entire life together. The headstone was simple, bearing both their names and a single inscription. She begged him not to send her back. He saw her tears and opened his door. From that moment grew a love that will never die. Their descendants continued to work the ranch, to help those in need, to honor the legacy of compassion and strength that Yates and Felicity had established. The valley remained a place of refuge, where those running from darkness could find light, where love conquered fear, where second chances bloomed like wildflowers in spring. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the wind whispered through the pines and the mountains glowed in the setting sun, people swore they could see 2 figures standing on the porch of the old house, hands intertwined, looking out over the valley they'd built together. Ghosts, perhaps, or maybe just memories so strong they'd imprinted on the land itself. Either way, they stood as a reminder that love, real love, the kind built on respect and tenderness and choosing each other every single day, was stronger than any hardship, longer lasting than any lifetime, and worth every risk taken to find it. The story of Yates and Felicity Youngblood lived on, passed down through generations, inspiring countless others to choose compassion, to stand up for those who could not stand up for themselves, to believe that even in the darkest moments, hope could be found. Their love had started with a desperate plea and a cowboy's kind heart, and it had grown into something eternal, a testament to the transformative power of choosing love over fear, kindness over cruelty, together over alone. In the wild and often unforgiving landscape of Colorado in the late 1800s, where survival was never guaranteed and hardship was commonplace, they had carved out something rare and precious, a happy ending, earned through courage and sacrifice, and an unwavering commitment to each other. It was a love story for the ages, proof that even in the roughest circumstances, beauty could bloom, love could flourish, and two souls could find exactly what they needed in each other. Their great-great-grandchildren still worked the land, still told the story, still helped those in need, carrying forward the legacy that had begun on that long-ago night when a frightened woman found salvation in a cowboy's compassion. The valley remained beautiful, the mountains stood eternal, and the love of Yates and Felicity Youngblood lived on, immortal in the hearts of all who heard their tale.